The concepts of BICS and CALP were introduced by Jim Cummins, a linguist from Canada, University of Ontario, and he describes them in terms of a metaphor using an iceberg. He refers to basic interpersonal communication skills as the essential language of conversation. It's the easy type of language that we first learn. It only takes 1 to 3 years to develop, even from birth, and really at any point in a person's life when they're learning a new language. But it's general kind of everyday language. It's not sufficient to facilitate academic success. If you want to do well in school, you have to do better than being able to just hold a decent conversation in a particular language. So Cummins says there's a different type of proficiency called CALP, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, which is like the underlying structure of language. It's what's beneath the waterline in his iceberg metaphor. CALP is that deep structure. It's what allows us to really think in the language, to use the language for learning purposes, to advance our skills and our abilities and even our cognition in service of language. So it's the ability to communicate effectively with clarity, but also at a level that is higher than what we would consider conversational. You can carry on, sure, advanced interpersonal conversations, but you're also able to articulate thoughts, ideas, notions, opinions. You can be more persuasive. You can use language in service of some higher order metacognitive types of skills. Because of that, CALP takes 5 to 7 years to develop, possibly longer, and requires formal education. Without formal education, it doesn't actually happen. Not that you would need it in some cultures, but education is fundamental to the development of CALP. Now, Cummins says the relationship between one language, which he terms L1, and a second language, which would be L2, is that the better developed the first language is, the easier it is to learn the second language. So BICS doesn't really do much for you in terms of learning a second language. It is the deeper structure, CALP, that allows that. And the degree or the extent to which the two languages have what Cummins refers to as common underlying proficiency, that is what they overlap in. Some languages will have the same alphabet, some will have the same sounds, some will have the same words, etc. The more common underlying proficiency, then the easier it is to engage in the process of linguistic transfer, which means to allow you to acquire that second language or to learn that second language. So the common underlying proficiency between the two languages, rather than their separate underlying proficiencies, is what allows the acquisition of a second language to an equal or even better degree than how it's been developed. That's assuming, of course, as I said, that CALP has been developed. BICS itself does not facilitate that type of transfer. And that's a problem for us in education. Remember that social language is what we learn when we start kindergarten. So you see on the left the kinds of things, the slang terms, high frequency words, hello, how are you, the polite things, the things you engage in on a daily basis, the things you use to make friends, to tell people that you're hungry and so on. It's what children do. The academic language is more complex. It's more related to the content of the curriculum. It's more related to what you're being taught in school. It's the kind of vocabulary that's not typically used in conversation or used at home or used among friends in social settings. It's the kind of language that only generally takes place in an academic environment. That is when you're in school. And CALP must be understood as not even emerging until after around 5 to 7 years of formal instruction. Now, what's important about that is that CALP is essentially built upon BICS. You come to school at the age of 5, you've already developed great proficiency in conversational language. That's not difficult to do. And at that point, when you receive instruction, is when your CALP continues to evolve. But after 5 to 7 years is when it begins to emerge. And understand that emerging doesn't come full form. It means that it's just the beginning of CALP and that you can have intermediate CALP later, you can have advanced CALP later, that this proficiency is not a binary kind of system, that in fact it is a developmental one, a continuum where you can reach higher and higher and higher levels of proficiency. Now, again, academic language differs from the community language. What do you think is spoken in the community? Well, it's generally a mixture of the language of the home, which is often going to be conversational, but the kind of language that is used within the community to connect with each other, to communicate with each other, to interact with each other. And that language can be quite different than what's at home, and it can be quite different than what's going on at school. As I mentioned, we rarely use CALP level type of language to interact with our friends. We'll use what we have at home. But even if what's at home is just standard conversational type of language, that language can also be modified in terms of what we learn, what we hear, and how we use it